We'll get ourselves seated and comfortable. Thank you very much. So this panel has a really interesting question. It's building on a lot of other questions we've had during the day of what is quantum advantage, but what is a killer quantum app is interesting. So I'm John Lincoln. As I was introduced, I chair the chief executive of the Photonics Leadership Group in the UK, a nice 15 billion UK industry, close to $1 trillion globally, and an industry that's used to breakthroughs. Optical fiber underpins the internet. You don't have a digital economy without it. High power lasers, they cut, weld, and mark almost every single piece of metal that's manufactured in the globe. Plenty of breakthroughs, right, over the years, over many decades. The question here is, what are the same breakthroughs that quantum's going to deliver, where and when? And I'm really pleased to say that we've got a great panel in front of you from very diverse backgrounds to try and inform that question. And we're going to break it down into some of its constituent parts, including what we mean by breakthrough, right? Because it occurs to me that breakthrough commercially is different from breakthrough technically, and therefore it's quite an interesting question to break that down. But first of all, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, talk about who they are and what their interest is in quantum. Jamie.
All right, so I'm Jamie Garcia. I'm the Technical Program Director for Strategic Geographies and Research Outreach for IBM Quantum. My background, I actually hold a PhD in chemistry and came into the quantum area about 10 years ago now.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Corey O'Mara. I'm Chief Quantum Scientist at E.ON Digital Technology, based out of Munich, and I oversee all the quantum applications of the company.
Okay, I'm Lee Lapworth. I'm a fellow in computational science at Rolls-Royce, background in classical supercomputing and computational fluid dynamics, and I lead the Rolls-Royce quantum computing activity.
Thank you very much. So we've had discussion this morning, and I do recommend you submit any questions you have in the magic method of submitting questions. Is what is a breakthrough use case? Now, a breakthrough use case is different to saying where is their quantum advantage. I refer you to VHS versus Betamax. Betamax had the video advantage; it commercially failed. Right. So, how would you define a breakthrough use case, Jamie?
I think that that's a really challenging question, right? From a scientific standpoint, it's usually something that you weren't expecting, that you find as a process, a part of a process of exploring a scientific question, and that people maybe wouldn't have predicted happen, that ends up highly influencing the field, right? So that's what I think of when I think of breakthrough. And then, of course, like, as you mentioned, oftentimes there's a commercialization component to it. So where it really actually moves the needle in a market, for example, or where you start seeing widespread adoption. So I think all of those kind of contribute to what a breakthrough could potentially be.
Cool. Thank you. Corey.
Yeah, I agree. I would push it a bit more in this use case. I would push it more towards the scientific aspect. So in quantum computing, I would define a breakthrough as something which can't be done. I mean, maybe a bit more kind of a quantum advantage perspective here. So quantum advantage combined with the commercial aspect. And I think it's going to be a kind of trajectory to kind of get there. But more, can you do something that you can't do classically?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Hey.
So I'll give an answer from classical supercomputing. So for us, a breakthrough it's a sudden step change in capability. Mm-hmm. And I'll give an example. So we make gas turbines. There's about 4,000 aerofoils in a gas turbine. So I've been at Rolls-Royce for a very long time. We used to be able to model one aerofoil at a time, and then we could model a few, and then we could model a whole compressor in steady state. So each one of those was a step in capability. And what we're doing now is trying to model a whole gas turbine fully and steadily. So these sudden step changes in capability then work their way through to a better product. And that's the name of the game, making better products.
Thank you. So we hear the word step change there as a really important aspect of breakthrough. Now, quantum is unusual in that it's a defined field. It's technically defined about what we mean by quantum 2.0 rather than the market definition. You can apply it to everything from investment banking to modeling turbines. So that breakthrough use case, that step change, and it's interesting in the world of quantum where you can be in one state or the other or both. How do you think we need to define how people view breakthrough use cases in the world of quantum? Because we hear a lot about, can we have a few more qubits for a compute application? Can we do PNT denial for how long, for how far? But do we have to change how we think of breakthroughs in the world of commercializing quantum? Lee?
So we've heard this morning people talking about big quantum being able to do something that classical computers can't. And I'll give an example from my own experience. So one of my former roles, excuse me, was bringing in a new CFD code into Rolls-Royce, and at the point we brought it in, it needed 5 times as much memory, and it was 5 times slower than the incumbent code, but it gave better answers. And then there was a 2 to 3 year journey of them bringing that code in and adopting it. So some of these things, the word breakthrough suggests a moment in time. It is not a moment in time. It's 3 or 4 years at best, sometimes 10 years.
So breakthrough is a process rather than a point in time. It's an interesting.
And there's always, certainly in my field, there's always an incumbent you're trying to displace.
Yeah. So breakthrough relative to state of the art. Jamie?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, although it has a different definition from quantum advantage, you can't kind of get away from that when you're thinking about breakthroughs in quantum. So we define quantum advantage as faster, cheaper, or more accurate than classical alone. This means a couple of different things, has a couple of different implications. One is that you can couple quantum with classical to devise some sort of solution. And the second part is that it's like you're referring to, it's a cumulative process. You start seeing small examples of this, and over time they accumulate in different areas to kind of represent a field or a body of examples.
Corey, would you say that's true? If it happens steadily over time, how would you know a breakthrough had happened?
I always think about it in the sense of if you look at the AlphaFold sort of project, right? So there was its scientific kind of competition, right? And then there was a moment of a breakthrough, but it was built up from years of scientific kind of discovery. And I think it will be something similar there. So it'll be years of scientific kind of creation. Some things might not go, so public, maybe very technical details that a few people kind of understand. And then hopefully sort of breaking through this barrier in some kind of competition or sort of in the scientific community first. And that itself is a process where you go through sort of, it's built upon publication in good high impact factor journals to eventually have a moment of great success. And I think something like that might happen in this field.
Interesting.
So I'll just add to that and just clarify what I said earlier. I think there is a period when you are developing a new capability. Then there's, relatively speaking, there's a sort of aha moment when you think, yes, I've done it. I've got something that's an advantage in terms of accuracy. There is then, and I'm a big fan of the Gartner hype cycle for this, there is then another period where you actually put that in the hands of users that can actually realize a benefit with that app.
Yeah, when you start seeing people pick it up as a useful scientific tool and using it for things and trying it out against their use cases, like in industry, for example, I think that's a good indicator that you have something that is considered to be a breakthrough.
Is that going beyond technical performance? So technical performance is it better than the incumbent? Does it get you more accurate results? But to be a real breakthrough in a use case, and remember the question is breakthrough use case, not breakthrough in quantum tech, breakthrough use case, what else do we have to do other than does it do something more accurate? What else is important to go into that mix? And you touched on it, users getting their sticky hands on it. Anything else, Jamie? You would say?
Well, I think it's the full stack of the software, right, development that goes along with the hardware that needs to mature to a point where people can use it. A lot of times they're coming from different backgrounds and trying to apply it towards, chemistry or finance or what have you. And they're not necessarily going to be ones going in and calibrating the hardware themselves and trying to, devising all the circuits just on their own with pen and paper. A lot of times there needs to be an assistance to that, to being able to set up the problem in the right way so that it can run on the quantum computer. So I think that that's really going to be necessary before you start having more of this widespread adoption, like we've been discussing here, both in academic realm, but also in industrial as well.
It's interesting. Rolls very commercial, make hardware for a living, right? If you don't make good jet engines, we don't get to fly around the world. What would you say? And so technical performance Rolls-Royce is a technical performance company, right? Your engines are technical performance bastions of everything. But to be a success, what else does quantum have to do other than give you technical performance? What does it have to do other than provide more accurate simulations, do that whole turbine?
So at one level, it's just another computer. And we've had many generations of computing. And if we look far enough into the future, it will just be another computer. People will just load programs and run on it. Ultimately, I mean, in one of my former roles, I was responsible for bringing in a new supercomputer into Rolls-Royce. At that point, it's the economy stupid, to coin a phrase. So I think at some point, the modalities, and I do believe in horses for courses, so that will be a factor. The performance of the machine will be a factor, but at the end of the day, it will be the accountants that make the decision based on the cost of the machine.
What about applications outside compute? Right, so the breakthrough does not have to come in compute. What about applications outside compute? It may not be your total domain, absolutely, but any thoughts, Corey, about breakthrough outside?
Like in what sense?
Sensing or timing? Are we going to see the breakthrough not come from compute?
Oh, I mean, I mainly work on compute, so I am not qualified to answer that. Yeah, I mean, I think that when people talk about quantum advantage and doing something undeniably faster or better than classical computers, than all classical computers and all known current classical algorithms, I think that's a pretty big main target to go, and it's really hard, and everyone has to work together on it. So I'm happy enough staying in my wheelhouse of quantum computing, but maybe you guys have a better answer.
Jamie?
Oh, I always think of sort of some of the fundamental science and physics that still needs to be realized in order to really start scaling these things out. And you start talking about connecting quantum computers to each other and things like that. So what are the different things that need to happen? For example, transducers, that is one area, some of the components that need to go into like, how do you actually run these quantum computers and what can you do with them? So I think that there's still some very open science questions that still have to be there. There has to be breakthroughs, right, in the science in order to be able to get to the point of scale that we talk about for quantum.
Okay, and is that because to get through, you need a lot of users? To get through the economic question, back to what Lee's point is that if you're not making tens or hundreds, they become too expensive for the accountants to sign them off.
Yeah, and you need to be at the scale to run, valuable problems, right? To be able to run circuits that are of interest, and that's going to be a challenge. There's a lot of, like I said, fundamental science questions, but also engineering challenges and breakthroughs that need to happen there to make that happen.
Lee, Rolls, great engineering company.
Yeah. Gas turbine engines are a pretty hostile environment. So the things that we do on the ground when the engine lands, we put a borescope into the engine and look at the blades and look for wear. An airfoil is shaped like that. So trying to look at every aspect of a blade is difficult. So potentially some of the quantum sensing, quantum imaging may be useful. I mean, we're currently using things like AI to look for wear and degradation. So what are we're interested in how the blade wears and whether they need to be serviced. So I can see applications in sensing, definitely. I think the crypto, the networking side, we like every other part of our IT ecosystem, we'll just buy that. We'll just buy a solution for that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, especially if you look at what some of the people are doing in position and timing denial solutions, which are getting very rapidly towards market, right? Yeah. Indeed. So there are some barriers, there are some uncertainties, there always are. So whenever we try and see what's going to happen in the future and where breakthroughs, there are uncertainties. Where do you think the uncertainties are greatest for the quantum breakthroughs, Jamie?
My genuine thoughts on this is that it's going to be in translating between different people coming from different backgrounds to realize things like quantum advantage. So actually with partners and IBM, we've started these things called working groups in different areas like healthcare and life sciences, optimization, high energy physics, and beyond, to start to try to tackle that because oftentimes what we find is that we need a lot of valuable perspectives to come together, but people don't speak the same language. So I think that the biggest barrier is getting people in the same room that are technical experts coming from different backgrounds or coming from industry, to bring that together and really start to think about and put pen to paper as to how quantum is going to impact problems that are of interest.
So the classic siloing of the people with solutions and the people with the problem not talking to each other.
Well, being able to talk to people who are quantum experts, being able to talk, I've personally experienced this, right? I've sat in a room where there was a chemist and, a quantum information scientist, and they kept talking past each other. And it was only when they actually went to the whiteboard and started writing things down and described a Bell state in a way that a chemist could understand, right, with their notations, that we actually were starting to be able to work together. So it's going to require that. And I think that is probably one of the biggest challenges, because it's not something that you can just solve quickly with, a technological advancement.
Corey, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And I would take it one step further, that it's also communicating to people with the money. So, it's like, you could have a breakthrough, you could have a scientific breakthrough, you could prove quantum advantage. And how do you communicate that correctly to a board, for example, right? To kind of put that as a tool, as just another computer, into a pipeline, into a product and industry. And that's a whole other set of challenges to communicate the potential, right? So you have to have quite an open, forward-thinking and innovative board, for example, to pay some costs to sort of get a quantum team started, to kind of integrate it into potential solutions in your company. Because even a scientific breakthrough will be, even if it's talking between physicists, mathematicians, quantum information, chemists, material scientists, at the end of the day, it's going to be real nitty-gritty science to kind of do this. And that's a very far away from a commercial application. Yeah, it might just be something quite technical and scientific, but where do you even apply that into, that's the killer use case question, right? So where do you actually apply that into a real world industry problem? And so that is a challenge to communicate that, I think.
Lee, anything to add?
Yes. So for me, it's been touched on already this morning. The biggest barrier, I think, is we underestimate how hard the software and the applications will be. So again, I'll give an example. So so what we're working on is matrix sparse matrix inversion. So there is now a provably optimum algorithm for matrix inversion on a quantum computer. It will probably be another 10 years before that algorithm becomes an application.
Yeah. It's a major barrier. I'm going to go to one or two of the questions from the audience, and it's interesting. It picks up on what Corey says. Is a valuable first use case using quantum computers to design quantum computers? Right, the self-fulfilling prophecy question. Right,
Inception.
Yeah.
Computer.
Yeah. Is that a circular argument? Is an interesting question. But do you think quantum computers will have a role in solving some of those difficult algorithms? So passing that algorithm is a great case. Yeah. It's difficult to turn that into an algorithm that can be used. Can you get the quantum computer to help with that process? It's a bit harder than asking ChatGPT, which is my answer to most things.
Picking up on the session that I wasn't in, so I can't comment, but I think certainly using classical AI to design circuits will help. Using a quantum computer, so you could think of using a variational algorithm to optimize some circuit stuff, so that I can see some level of NISQ type optimization to design a error-corrected algorithm, maybe. But I'd put my money on AI first, though.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, classical AI. Yeah, excellent. Jamie, any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, we've been developing some classical AI tools actually to help with things like circuit transpilation and optimization and things like that. And even we have like a code assist that we use that's based off of Granite, which is our Watson platform, right? To help with this. And it does go back to that idea of you're not going to necessarily go in knowing how to map your problem onto a quantum computer and how to make your circuit actually work, right? So can you use AI to help with that? But yeah, I agree. I think it's probably going to be more on like the classical AI instead of like developing quantum, but never say never.
whenever we try and get through to breakthroughs, we have this classical problem. It's a classical problem. Which comes first, the money or the solution? You can't get the solution without the money. You need the solution to get the money. And that, in all new markets, that presents a problem because there is no proof of principle of the market. It's a white space. You can't say people are making this much money in quantum compute today, therefore I have a revolution that's going to make that much money tomorrow. So there's always a lot of conjecture. How can the developers of next generation solutions in the quantum reduce that uncertainty to give the people with the money more confidence that they will get a return on their investment so that we can have the funds to get to the breakthrough point? Lee?
Well, first of all, it depends whose money you're spending. And if it's a government grant, and I would encourage people to look for those because some of this stuff is still certainly in the research space. But the main one is to collaborate and look for partnerships, collaborate widely, and tend to pick. There's no shortage of people that have phoned me up and want to work with Rolls-Royce, but we've tended to pick a small number of people, and we continue to work with the same people and build up a long-term relationship.
Corey?
Talking from my experience, what we did to sort of get the ball rolling was we had a legitimate business use case that was extremely challenging to scale. So it was an optimization problem. It was related to electric vehicle charging, actually. And it was very challenging to scale past a couple hundred vehicles. And starting with this planted the seed because this is a kind of commercial offering E.ON as a company was looking to kind of make into a real product, but it literally was impossible to do. And so that kind of was a kickoff to say, okay, this could be one of the seeds where let's start investigating this potential, new version of a supercomputer. And so even something as simple as that, where we had like already a kind of business use case that was working in production, but just not working good enough, was kind of reduced the risk to kind of jump in.
Fantastic. So and somebody asked, well, why haven't we answered the question of the session? That's because that's what we get to at the end, right? Because it is one of this, where will be the first breakthrough use case for quantum? So we will wrap up with that question. Jamie, where do you think the first breakthrough
right there. I think that, so there's my personal interest and opinion, and then there's what I'm seeing. So what I'm seeing first is that I'm starting to see students and people and the general population and interested technical people start having access to quantum computers for the very first time. And that's something that is brand new. RPI put in a System 1 this last year. RPI is a university in New York in the US, for those of you who don't know. And they had an explosion of their student club from 40 members to 400. 75% of those new students said that they came to RPI so they could access the quantum computer. So I just want to put it out there that we don't know what we don't know. By any stretch of the imagination, we're not going to, I'm never going to be in the era of someone who got to tinker with a quantum system as a part of my undergraduate experience, right? So we're going to see things come out of people who have that accessibility for the first time. What I'm personally more interested in, or for myself, is the chemistry and materials applications that we're starting to see. So this year, we actually just published an example of what we call quantum utility for a chemistry example. This was joint work that we did with Riken and the University of Colorado, Boulder. And I think that is showing some really interesting promise as we're starting to scale up and get accurate simulations, more accurate than what we would have expected for sure. And we continue to develop that out for quantum chemistry calculations. And, I don't think a lot of people realize that what we can simulate accurately with chemistry classically today is actually quite small. These are very small systems. So things that can push the envelope in that area, I think is going to be really interesting and something to watch in the next couple of years.
Corey?
I think that, so the material science is known to be extremely hard classically. And I think that has to be the foundation of anything to be a breakthrough in quantum. I think it has to be hard classically. But it's very hard to find what's hard. So in many industrial problems, it's probably good enough. Yeah, you have some kind of heuristic, you solve it. So I agree with your answer, but I'm going to say that really the killer use case would be quantum optimization. So I think if you really could prove without a shadow of a doubt there's a sublinear runtime exponential speed up, let's say, for an optimization problem, and there's a lot of money being put into this research, that would be the killer.
Cool. Lee.
Okay, so for some perverse reason, we've picked the hardest problem to solve, not the one that's likely to be solved first. So we're interested in linear algebra. It's wrapped around CFD, computational fluid dynamics, but sparse matrix algebra is everywhere. So if that's solved, there's a huge market. But I think I'd agree with both of you. Quantum computers for quantum mechanics feels like it must be one of the early benefits, and then the complexity of large numbers for the optimization. So. And we're getting into both of those. We're not just doing
no arguments.
No arguments. This was very good. Excellent. So we are coming near the end of the panel. I'd like to thank the panelists very much for your input and your contributions. It's interesting to see where we will be in 10 years from now when we look back. I suspect the breakthrough will be something none of us imagined, because that's the nature of breakthroughs. If we knew what they are, we would be doing them and making money from them. So very much look forward to meeting everybody in 10 years from now, looking back and saying, where was the first billion made? It'll be an interesting time. Thank you all very much. Thank you, panelists. Thank you.